Hello and welcome to the Quality Control staff presentation that discusses the ethics and independence component of the firm's QC system. My name is Carla Anderson, and I am an assistant in the PCAOB's Office of the Chief Auditor. Today's staff presentation is one in a series of staff presentations that address the requirements of QC 1000, the firm's new standard on quality control, which will take effect on December 15th, 2025. Given the intent of this staff presentation is to focus on only one of the components of the firm's QC system, we will not be discussing all of the nuances of the standard and related amendments. Therefore, I encourage participants to read the adopting release in order to gain a more complete understanding of the new standard and related amendments, and explore the other implementation resources that have been issued to date, including a staff presentation and staff guidance document that provide an in-depth overview of QC 1000 and guidance for firms about how to comply with the standard. All of this can be found on the PCAOB's website. Before we get started, I'll state our standard disclaimer. The views expressed are offered in my capacity as staff of the PCAOB's Office of the Chief Auditor, but they are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the board as a whole, any individual board members, or other PCAOB staff. In our staff presentation on the firm's system of quality control and overview of QC 1000, we briefly covered 8 integrated components of the firm's QC system that are required to be included in a firm's design of its QC system. These components are consistent with other quality management standards and are presented on the slide. Today, we will be focusing on the ethics and independence component. The component is circled on the chart in red. The ethics and independence component addresses the fulfillment of firm and individual responsibilities under relevant ethical and independence requirements. Under QC 1000, ethics and independence requirements include the PCAOB's Ethics and Independence Standards and Rules, the SEC's rules on auditor independence, and other applicable requirements regarding accountant ethics and independence that are relevant to fulfilling their obligations and responsibilities in the conduct of engagements or in relation to the QC system, such as those arising under state law or the law of other jurisdictions. Other applicable requirements could include, for example, client confidentiality laws or legal and ethical obligations imposed by professional licensing authorities under state laws and laws of other jurisdictions, which in the U.S. is regulated at the state level, whereas outside of the U.S. it varies. There are other examples of what would be considered other applicable requirements. For example, most states have adopted some variant of the AICPA Code of Conduct. I want to highlight that, as this overview suggests, QC 1000 does not change existing ethics and independence requirements. Instead, QC 1000 requires the firm to put a QC system in place to oversee compliance with existing requirements. In addition, the requirements that are in QC 1000 are primarily based on previous PCAOB and SEC requirements regarding quality control around ethics and independence. I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. I want to point out that the quality objectives in this component, which we'll discuss in a moment, address compliance with ethics and independence requirements not just by firm personnel, but also by others who may be subject to ethics and independence requirements in relation to work they perform on behalf of the firm. This may include, for example, persons associated with a public accounting firm as defined in PCAOB rules, or covered persons in the firm under SEC independence rules that in each case do not meet QC 1000's definition of firm personnel. This can include individuals such as engagement quality reviewers from outside of the firm, or individuals who are not employed by the firm that perform audit procedures in a current period audit. The use of the term others who may be subject to ethics and independence requirements does not map directly to the terminology generally used in QC 1000. For example, some other participants, such as other accounting firms, are subject to independence requirements, while others, such as engaged specialists and the company's internal auditors, are not. To ensure that the requirements of QC 1000 align with and do not go beyond the ethics and independence requirements over which the QC system is required to operate, in the ethics and independence component of QC 1000 only, this terminology is used because it incorporates or refers back to the underlying ethics and independence requirements. For example, rather than having quality objectives that address compliance by other participants, in this component, the quality objective addresses compliance by others subject to the applicable ethics and independence requirements. Consequently, because these terms are defined in the already existing requirements, firms should already be familiar with their meanings and the implications of the requirements to individuals that meet one of their definitions. Again, QC 1000 does not change any existing ethics and independence requirements. Finally, I want to point out that the quality objectives in the ethics and independence component address both personal and firm level compliance. Personal violations include matters such as owning stock in companies that are audit clients of the firm or its affiliated entities while a covered person of the firm. Firm level violations include such matters as providing prohibitive services or failing to obtain required audit committee pre-approval before providing permissible services. The requirements for the ethics and independence component are included in paragraphs 30 through 36 of QC 1000. Before we dive into the quality objectives for this component, I would like to remind everyone that the quality objectives we discussed today are required to be established by the firm. QC 1000 specifies required quality objectives for each of the 6 components to which the risk assessment process applies. Quality objectives are a defined term in Appendix A of QC 1000. They are defined as the desired outcomes in relation to the components of the QC system to be achieved by the firm. There are 3 quality objectives for the ethics and independence component. The first quality objective covers understanding and complying with ethics and independence requirements. It states that ethics and independence requirements are understood and complied with by the firm and firm personnel, and with respect to work performed on behalf of the firm by others subject to such requirements. While maintaining independence and adhering to ethical requirements is each individual's responsibility, the firm also has responsibility and plays a critical role in ensuring that individuals understand those requirements and have the tools and resources they need to comply. The second quality objective covers violations and states that conditions, events, relationships, or activities that could constitute violations of ethics and independence requirements are properly identified, evaluated, and responded to by the firm and firm personnel on a timely basis. The intent of this quality objective is to reduce the risk of the firm's noncompliance by identifying potential violations of ethics and independence requirements in time to prevent many violations and to quickly remediate violations that do occur. For example, a firm that plans to acquire another firm could identify the acquisition as an event that could result in independence violations by the personnel of the acquired entity. This could prompt the firm to develop policies and procedures that address onboarding processes for firm personnel of acquired entities around independence. These policies and procedures would assist in identifying and resolving potential independence violations before the acquisition is completed. The last quality objective covers communication of violations to leadership and states that violations are communicated on a timely basis to the individual assigned operational responsibility for the firm's compliance with ethics and independence requirements. Timely communication and action should be sufficiently prompt to achieve its objective. In some cases, for example, where there is a high risk of severe or pervasive problem, communication and action may have to be immediate to be timely. Before we discuss the specified quality responses in the ethics and independence component, I'd like to highlight a few reminders about specified quality responses in general. In addition to the quality responses that firms design on their own through the risk assessment process, QC 1000 also includes specified quality responses. Specified quality responses are mandated policies and procedures that apply in some cases to all firms, and in other cases only to firms with a larger PCAOB audit practice. These specified quality responses are not intended to be comprehensive. Consequently, The specified quality responses alone are not sufficient to enable the firm to achieve all established quality objectives. Firms are required to include their own quality responses as well. Both the specified quality responses and the quality responses the firm designs and implements on its own are critical in addressing the firm's quality risks. One last important point is that designing and implementing appropriate quality responses, that is, the firm's policies and procedures, standardize the firm's actions and can help a firm to consistently comply with applicable professional and legal requirements. The ethics and independence component of QC 1000 includes a number of specified quality responses. First, I'm going to summarize them here into 4 areas. Then I'm going to go over the details of each of those areas. Those 4 areas are, number 1, general ethics and independence matters. Number 2, certain specific matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence. Number 3, communication regarding ethics and independence policies and procedures. And number 4, mandatory training on ethics and independence. As we go through the details of the requirements, I would like to point out again that these specified quality responses are primarily based on previous PCAOB and SEC requirements regarding quality control around ethics and independence. This includes the provisions regarding independence quality controls that were previously included in the requirements of the SEC practice session, SECPS. Those requirements were generally incorporated into QC 1000. In addition, under QC 1000, the requirements previously applicable only to SECPS member firms are now generally applicable to all firms. I'll refer to these previous requirements as SECPS requirements as we go through the rest of this presentation. The first specified quality response of the ethics and independence component, which is in paragraph 33 of the standard, covers policies and procedures over general ethics and independence matters, which I'll discuss briefly one by one. First, the firm is required to design, implement, and maintain policies and procedures around identifying and addressing matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on the independence of the firm, firm personnel, and affiliates of the firm. I want to point out here that the phrase may reasonably be thought to bear on the independence should be a phrase familiar to all firms because it is also used in PCAOB Rule 3526, Communication with Audit Committees Concerning Independence, which requires auditors to describe to the audit committee relationships that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence. The term focuses auditors on the perceptions that reasonable third parties may have when making independence determinations. Next, the firm is required to design, implement, and maintain policies and procedures around obligations of firm personnel and of associated persons of the firm other than firm personnel to perform work with integrity and objectivity. Concurrent with the adoption of QC 1000, the PCAOB also rescinded the Interim Ethics and Independence Standard, ET 102, Integrity and Objectivity, and replaced it with a new standard, EI 1000, Integrity and Objectivity. EI 1000 explains that integrity includes being honest and candid, not knowingly or recklessly misrepresenting facts, and not subordinating professional judgment. Objectivity means being impartial, intellectually honest, and free of conflicts of interests. Before we move on, I want to point out another term used in QC 1000 that firms should be familiar with. That is associated persons of the firm, which is defined in PCAOB Rule 1001 PI. Next, the firm is required to design, implement, and maintain policies and procedures around consultations on ethics and independence matters, including identifying ethics and independence matters requiring consultation. The specific focus on identifying matters requiring consultations should prompt firm personnel and others subject to such requirements to more effectively identify ethics and independence issues that are new, challenging, or complex, and that would benefit from evaluation by subject matter experts. Next, the firm is required to design, implement, and maintain policies and procedures around monitoring compliance with applicable ethics and independence requirements and related firm policies and procedures. The standard does not prescribe specific activities to meet this requirement, which allows scalability based on the firm's size and specific circumstances, and allows firms to choose which monitoring activities are an effective response to meet the quality objective. Firms may employ various manual and automated tools for evaluating compliance. Some examples of such tools have been observed through the board's oversight activities include having a centralized process to monitor business relationships, establishing an independence confirmation process that includes detailed guidance and questions related to independence and prohibited non-audit services, and periodically reviewing the completeness and accuracy of information reported on independence confirmations. I also want to point out that the firm's evaluation of compliance covers applicable ethics and independence requirements, as well as the firm's own policies and procedures. A firm may establish ethics and independence policies and procedures that are more restrictive than the rules of the SEC and PCAOB. A firm might do this, for example, to comply with requirements of other jurisdictions or to simplify compliance with SEC and PCAOB requirements by setting bright line policies and reducing the range for individual judgment. Under QC 1000, the firm's evaluation of compliance covers applicable ethics and independence requirements, as well as the firm's policies and procedures. Let's discuss the last specified quality response over general ethics and independence matters, which are also derived from the existing SECPS requirements for firms to have policies and procedures that address independence violation, and expands on the requirements to include ethics violations and to cover all firms. The firm is required to design, implement, and maintain certain policies and procedures with respect to violations and potential violations of ethics and independence requirements. Those include policies and procedures around a few different aspects. I'll go through each one by one. First, firms are required to have policies and procedures to identify conditions, events, relationships, and activities that could constitute ethics or independence violations. This includes violations involving the firm personnel, and with respect to work performed on behalf of the firm, others subject to such requirements. For example, if a firm or its network is contemplating a reorganization or restructuring that could affect the relationships among affiliated firms or other entities, identifying post-reorganization investment activities as such an activity could assist the firm in designing and implementing appropriate policies to prevent independence violations. Next, with respect to ethics and independence violations that do or could occur, the firm's policies and procedures are required to address taking preventative and corrective actions as appropriate to address violations on a timely basis. Such policies and procedures could specify, for example, the individuals responsible for taking preventative and corrective actions at the engagement or firm level, the timing of preventive and corrective actions, and any potential sanctions against firm personnel or other individuals for violating ethics and independence requirements. Ethics or independence violations may take a variety of form, and therefore the nature and extent of the preventive and/or corrective actions may also take a variety of forms commensurate to the severity and pervasiveness of the violation. Next, the firm's policies and procedures are required to address reporting requirements regarding ethics or independence violations of which individuals become aware that may affect the firm. This includes policies and procedures over the requirements for escalating reporting of such violations. The requirements in QC 1000 are principles-based, which allows each firm to determine which reporting mechanisms best fits its structure and address its quality risks. Through oversight activities, the board has observed that firms use a variety of methods for firm personnel to report violations. Some examples include direct communication lines to an ethics and independence group, designated individuals within the human resources or legal department, and whistleblower hotlines. Firms may assess each case individually and involve appropriate subject matter experts depending on the nature of the violation. Finally, the firm's policies and procedures are required to address communicating when an ethics or independence violation occurs as appropriate to external parties, for example, to the audit committee. Let's move on to the next group of specified quality responses in the ethics and independence component, which is paragraph 34. It relates to specific matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence. The first area of this specified quality response relates to identifying relationships with restricted entities. It requires the firm's policies and procedures for matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on the independence of the firm, firm personnel, and affiliates of the firm to include identifying firm and personal relationships and arrangements with restricted entities. This includes a process for identifying direct or material indirect financial interests that might impair the firm's independence of firm personnel that are managerial employees or partners, shareholders, members, or other principals. I want to point out that firm and personal relationships and arrangements with restricted entities include, for example, financial, employment, or business relationships, non-audit services, contingent fee arrangements, partner rotation, certain tax services, and arrangements requiring audit committee pre-approval. Also, I want to highlight that the term restricted entities includes all audit clients of the firm, including affiliates of the audit client and affiliates of the firm. Note again that the term restricted entities is not a new term. It was addressed in SECPS requirements. If the firm issued audit reports with respect to more than 100 issuers during the prior calendar year, the process to identify investments in securities that might impair the independence of the firm or firm personnel is required to be automated. There is also a requirement similar to the previous SECPS requirements that firms that audit more than 500 SEC registrants are already required to comply with. Let's spend a little more time talking about what such an automated system might look like. This specified quality response requires firms that issued audit reports with respect to more than 100 issuers during the prior calendar year to develop a system that tracks audit engagements and financial investments held by professionals such that the conflict verification process is automated. The system could be automated in a variety of different ways. For example, such a system could require firm professionals to accurately self-report and manually enter their investments into the system in a timely manner, at which point the system automatically compares the investments input by the individual to the firm's list of restricted entities. Such a process is depicted on the top half of this slide. Conversely, the system might rely on automated data feeds from brokers instead of manual entry by firm professionals, as depicted on the bottom half of this slide. Okay, coming back to the description of this specified quality response. Firms that issued audit reports with respect to 100 or fewer issuers during the prior calendar year are required to consider automating this process, taking into account the quality risks and the nature and circumstances of the firm. A firm that is required only to consider automating this process may actually conclude that such an automated identification of their professionals' security investment holdings is an appropriate quality response. A firm might come to this conclusion if, for example, the firm's monitoring activities found high rates of noncompliance by firm personnel with the firm's policies and procedures for reporting financial investments. As another example, a firm with close to 100 issuers and a significant number of managers and partners may assess timely identification of personal investments that may impair independence as a quality risk, and a quality response to address that risk may include an automated system to help facilitate a more timely relationship checking process. Let's move on to the next area of this specified quality response, which provides requirements related to the firm's list of restricted entities. The firm's policies and procedures must include maintaining a list of restricted entities and making it available to firm personnel and others performing work on behalf of the firm who are subject to independence requirements. This includes updating and communicating at least monthly and more frequently if appropriate, additions to the list of restricted entities to firm personnel and others performing work on behalf of the firm whose relationships and arrangements with such additional restricted entities may reasonably be thought to bear on the independence of the firm. The standard does not prescribe how a firm is required to design this process. Firms can determine the specific methods and tools they need to keep their list of restricted entities up to date and to ensure that any additions are communicated on a timely basis to firm personnel and other individuals. This determination could be based on factors such as, for example, the size of the firm and the number and complexity of audit clients the firm has. For example, a smaller firm with a small group of professionals and a stable portfolio of audit clients may have a manual process for maintaining the list of restricted entities. A larger firm with many audit clients and firm affiliates may use an automated tool, which could help facilitate more frequent updates to the list of restricted entities. Other factors can be considered when designing the process. For example, firms may choose to communicate additions to the list of restricted entities via email monthly, weekly, or as and when additions are made to the list. Or on an at least monthly basis, a firm might communicate that there have been additions to the list of restricted entities via email and include within the email a link to an accessible web-hosted list of additions. If there are no additions, there's no required communication. The firm can also determine whether to communicate additions to the restricted entities list to a targeted group of individuals or more broadly. Some firms provide targeted communications to only those individuals to which the communication is relevant. If a firm uses this targeted communication approach, it needs to ensure that no individual is excluded from the communication that should have in fact received it. That is, because they have a relationship or arrangement with the entity that could reasonably be thought to bear on the independence of the firm. While not a specific requirement under QC 1000, firms may determine that the most effective way to design the specified quality response would be to implement IT systems and processes that facilitate more targeted or automated communications of the additions to the list of restricted entities to the relevant individuals. Such systems may continuously perform automated comparisons of all engagements, business relationships, and financial relationships with their list of restricted entities, allowing the firm to make targeted communications to affected personnel, including notification of how additions to the list of restricted entities apply to the affected personnel. Some firms are members of networks that develop systems, processes, and controls to monitor network firms' compliance with independence requirements, including maintaining a database of restricted entities. Other firms may implement tools developed by third-party providers to perform these tasks. It's important to understand that when a firm uses resources from networks or third-party providers, the firm is still responsible for the effective operation of the network or third-party provider resources it uses in its QC system. The firm needs to obtain an understanding of how the resources were developed and supplement or adapt them as necessary so their use enables the operation of the firm's QC system and the performance of its engagements in accordance with applicable professional and legal requirements and the firm's policies and procedures. Coming back to the description of the specified quality response. The firm's policies and procedures must also include requiring that the list of restricted entities be reviewed before the firm enters into any relationships, engagements to perform non-audit services, or fee arrangements that might affect compliance with independence requirements. If the review indicates that action is required under applicable professional and legal requirements or the firm's policies and procedures, the firm is required to take the required actions on a timely basis. Finally, as it relates to the list of restricted entities, the firm's policies and procedures must include requiring firm personnel to review the list of restricted entities in a few different circumstances. Those circumstances where review of the list is required are number one, upon employment by or engagement with the firm, number two, after additions to the restricted entities list are communicated by the firm, number three, prior to themselves or a relevant family member obtaining a direct or material indirect financial interest in an entity, or entering into or modifying a direct or material indirect relationship with an entity. Number four, prior to changes in position. And number five, prior to entering into any business or employment relationships. If the review indicates that action is required under applicable professional and legal requirements or the firm's policies and procedures, the firm's policies and procedures should require the firm personnel to take the actions on a timely basis. The next area of the specified quality response related to the firm's policies and procedures for specific matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence relates to obtaining certifications from firm personnel. For ease, we've also summarized it in the table on the slide. The firm's policies and procedures for matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on the independence of the firm, firm personnel, and affiliates of the firm must include obtaining certifications from firm personnel regarding familiarity and compliance with, number one, SEC and PCAOB independence requirements, applicable ethics requirements, and the firm's independence and ethics and policies and procedures upon employment and at least annually thereafter. And number two, SEC and PCAOB independence requirements and the firm's independence policies and procedures upon any change in professional circumstances that is relevant to independence. The standard requires firms to obtain certifications every time firm personnel have a change in professional circumstances that is relevant to independence, such as a change in role or geographic location. Changes within the firm, such as promotions, moving offices, or changing practice groups, may have consequences under independence rules, for example, changes to covered person status, that would result in noncompliance. Although there is no requirement to obtain certification with regard to changes in personal circumstances, because such changes can have independence implications under SEC and PCAOB independence requirements, some firms may decide to use certifications or other forms of communication to identify such independence implications. Moving on to the last area of the specified quality response related to the firm's policies and procedures for specific matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence. QC 1000 contains a requirement regarding firm policies and procedures for identifying matters that require pre-approval by the audit committee and obtaining such approval. The primary reason for identifying matters that require audit committee pre-approval and obtaining such pre-approval resides at the engagement level. The firm's policies and procedures, however, provide tools and guidance that enable engagement teams to properly identify the relevant matters and obtain necessary pre-approvals on a timely basis. Let's move on to the next specified quality response under the ethics and independence component of a firm's QC system. Firms are required to make their ethics and independence policies and procedures available to firm personnel and others performing work on behalf of the firm who are subject to ethics and independence requirements. This includes requiring firms to communicate any substantive changes to such policies and procedures on a timely basis. When deciding how to make ethics and independence policies and procedures available, firms would consider how to make firm personnel and others performing work on behalf of the firm aware of where and how to find these policies and procedures in a way that supports those individuals' ongoing compliance with certification and other requirements. The standards requires the firm to communicate any substantive changes to its ethics and independence policies and procedures on a timely basis. The final specified quality response for the ethics and independence component is that the firm is required to provide mandatory training to firm personnel that addresses ethics and independence requirements and the firm's ethics and independence policies and procedures. The training is required to be provided both near the time of the firm personnel's initial employment and periodically, that is, at least annually thereafter. The specific content and extent and timing of this training will be determined by the firm, but the program is required to cover both the relevant professional and legal requirements, for example, regarding financial interests, business relationships, employment relationships, prescribed services, and fee arrangements, and the firm's related policies and procedures. By not specifying the content for such mandatory training, the standard allows firms the ability to develop training programs based on their circumstances. For example, a firm may develop its training to place a greater emphasis on areas with recurring ethics and independence findings across the firm, or it may target specific ethics and independence findings in different regions. Similarly, the standard does not specify how the firm would provide such training. A firm may develop and deliver its own training, contract with others to provide training, or provide access to third-party training. If a firm provides this training via a third-party resource, it might have to consider whether modifications or supplements to the training may be needed for firm-specific matters, including requirements of the firm's ethics and independence policies and procedures. I know we just covered a lot, so let's circle back to this initial slide I presented, which summarizes the specified quality responses into the 4 areas we just discussed in detail. To wrap it up, I'll summarize again. Those 4 areas are number 1, general ethics and independence matters. Number 2, certain specific matters that may reasonably be thought to bear on independence. Number 3, communication regarding ethics and independence policies and procedures. And number 4, mandatory training on ethics and independence. Before we wrap up today's staff presentation, I wanted to remind everyone of our QC implementation webpage located on the PCAOB's website. We continue to update it as we develop additional implementation resources. These include a staff presentation of an overview of QC 1000, as well as staff guidance documents covering aspects of QC 1000 and the related amendments to AS 2901. The QC implementation webpage also includes a phone number and form for contacting the PCAOB regarding standards-related inquiries. If you subscribed to PCAOB News, you will receive a notification when the page is updated with new resources. For more information on the standard and related amendments, please also see PCAOB Release Number 2024-005 on the PCAOB's website. Thank you for listening and have a great day.